let's talk about evaluating your options. If you are an angel investor getting into venture investing, what are your options? There's basically three channels that you can go into. You can stay as an angel investor doing direct deals into startups. You can be part of a syndicate like mine or many others, or you can invest through a VC fund. These options are not mutually exclusive. You have to decide what works best for you. Even though I would say that for angel investors, we tend to see them do direct deals and syndicates together and VC funds as a separate bucket, right? There tends to be less overlap between the first two and the third one. So we'll get into the reasons why later. What I would like to start out with when you're thinking about the option is making sure you understand what the return patterns look like. Then we'll talk about the qualitative differences among these three options. And I'm going to give you my recommendation or my framework for how to think about this. So let's start out with the first one, which is being an angel investor. So if you are an angel investor, you are going to invest directly into deals. And let's say you invest into some number of companies N. Okay, so that's the number. Let's say that you as an investor invest in all of these companies. Each bar here represents one company. Yeah. And the bars are the same height because you invested the same amount into each company, let's say $1,000 or whatever it is. Now, if you're going to be doing venture, what you should be looking for is companies that has a theoretically multiples upside, super high upside. But on the other hand, each investment that you do has a limited downside. The worst you can do is basically lose all of your money. Right? And because the risk reward is so stark, you basically need to be playing for companies that have a really outsized return, because there's a very good chance that a lot of the companies you invest in are going to go to zero. And so let's say your portfolio looks like this. The green bars are going to represent companies that return a positive profit, and the ones in red actually lose money. So the way to think about your returns as an angel investor is that your portfolio return is just going to be the summation of all the individual portfolio companies. So here, this 1x return line on your portfolio represents the sum of all the capital that you invest in. And we're hoping that in this case, the green bars are more than offset the red bars, which is the losers. And here, your portfolio return is just going to be the green bar here, right? Everything above 1x. So really straightforward portfolio management. Next, let's look at your return patterns if you invest into a syndicate. So if you're a member of a syndicate, imagine that you get presented this series of deals, these 6 companies from A, B, C, D, E, F. Now, the power and the value of being part of a syndicate is that you as an investor gets to decide which companies to invest in and how much, okay? So the decision-making power is in your hands. I would say on the average deal that you invest in on a syndicate, expect around 5% of your capital, maybe up to 7% going towards administrative costs. So this will cover a little bit of management fee and also an SPV. So this is the vehicle, the legal vehicle that manages the money over the life of the fund, of the investment. So 5 to 7%, we're just going to use 5% for simplicity, which means that every investment that you make, 95% of the capital actually gets deployed into the portfolio companies. In this case, you as an investor, you choose to invest in companies B and E, so the blue ones here. And so your returns is going to be restricted only to these companies, obviously. And here we are calculating returns as anything above the 1x. So even though 95 cents on the dollar gets deployed into the actual company, we're only calculating profits above your original 1x. So in this case, Company B does okay, has a return. Company D loses money, and company E does really well. Now, by the way, everyone, I'm starting to see questions trickle in. So feel free to leave it in chat, make it a public message, and I will turn to questions after this and we can have a discussion. Coming back to this. In this case, the way we calculate your returns is that as an investor in the syndicate, you're entitled to 1x liquidation preference, which means that you get your original capital back, which is the 1x. Above that, the syndicate will take 20% carried interest. So above 1x, you would get 80 cents of every dollar that is returned. So on company B and company E, these profits, you will get your original 1x of capital back plus 80 cents of the profit or 80% of the profit for these two companies. And on company D, which loses money, unfortunately, you get whatever residual value is left over, and the syndicate lead does not take any profit share from. Okay, so this is the return pattern for a syndicate investor. And finally, for a fund, this is your returns profile as an investor into a venture capital fund. Now, with a venture capital fund, earlier on, I spoke about the 2 and 20 business model. Again, that means 2% of your capital going towards management fee every single year and 20% carried interest, which is the profit. The average fund life is 10 years. So 2% a year times 10 years basically is 20%, which means that if you invested as an investor into a VC fund, you are going to be paying 20% management fee over the 10-year fund life, and 80% of your capital actually gets deployed into the portfolio companies. Now, what happens here is that the fund manager is going to deploy this 80% of capital into a number of portfolio companies. You don't get visibility into this as an investor. Okay, the fund manager or GP is deciding all of this. Now, let's say that the portfolio returns this pattern. The companies in green is profitable and the ones in red lose money. In this case, the total portfolio return looks like this. Again, we are calculating portfolio return as everything above the 1x return line, even though only 80% of the capital invested actually gets deployed. And in this case, great. The winners on the portfolio return above 1x and it outweighs all the losers. So as an investor in the fund, your returns waterfall looks like this. You are entitled to your original capital back. 100%, this is your 1x liquidation preference. Sometimes the fund will have a return hurdle, which means that the fund needs to return you some fixed amount of return a year. Usually it's 7-8% before the carried interest apply. And so in this case, above this, the portfolio would return you 80 cents on the dollar for any profit above that. And the fund manager will take 20% carried interest. So this summarizes the return patterns for a fund investor. Now, if you think about all of your options, these three buckets, you can be an independent angel on the left, be part of a syndicate in blue, or invest in a VC fund in green. Again, I will stress that these are not mutually exclusive. You can pick and choose what works for you. There's a lot of different ways to think about this, from filtering and curation, deal access, how much diligence you receive, the decision control, etc., etc. There's a lot of detail here in this slide. I'm going to fast forward a little bit and to just give you the takeaway because we're a little bit short on time for the content. If you look at all of this, the way I think about it as an angel, if I was looking this as an angel investor, it basically comes down to this. Firstly, VC funds, this is a big ticket blind pool vehicle. You are completely passive. So you need to be able to write at the very low end, $250,000 check up to millions or tens of millions. And so because of the cost of entry, this basically disqualifies 99% of all angel investors. It's just not accessible. Even if you could afford it, is this what you want to do? Do you want to be completely passive? Most people, it just rules it out, which basically means that your options are to be an independent angel or to invest through a syndicate. I don't think you have to pick and choose. You should keep your options in hand and to pick the best of both worlds. But what is the argument for you to be part of a syndicate? It comes down to this for me. I think that if you pay attention to the right syndicates, you get curation, better deal access, and filtering benefits. You should be getting a diligence benefit, although I will say that it does vary from group to group. The simplest thing that you can do here is that if you're picking and evaluating a syndicate, ask them for the due diligence on a recent deal and to just see, does this meet your bar for what good due diligence looks like? And if it does, it's somebody that you can follow. If they don't have any diligence, then probably don't spend your time on it. Now, in both cases, whether you invest as an angel or be part of a syndicate, you have 100% decision control over your portfolio, so there's no trade-off. I think there's a time saving because somebody like me, I find it fun to do diligence even if it takes me late in the night. And so somebody is doing the heavy lift for you. There's also a diversification benefit. You get to spread your capital into a broader range of stages. You get better quality deal flow for whatever you want to invest in. The trade-off that you have to make is there are some fees and you do pay carried interest. So you have to decide for yourself whether it is worth it. And it's up to all of you, right? I'll say for myself, I follow other syndicates. If I see a deal that I'm really excited by, I have no issue investing and to pay carried interest. So that's my decision, but you have to decide for yourself.